Hey, I'm the Grow Boss, and one of the questions you guys ask me in chat on my webcast is this. Let me read it to you. Check this out. Is flushing and hydro the same rules as cocoa and soil? I notice a lot of vendors sell a flushing agent for hydro. Is it recommended to flush and hydro if I didn't overfeed? Okay, I want to point out first that last little part, if I didn't overfeed, do about flushing and hydro. So let me tell you what flushing is, okay? And then we can sort of go from there, because it's a good question you guys ask a lot. You guys ask it frequently, new growers, because there's so much data out there. Here's the thing. You could feed your plants once a month, and that's a pretty good starting point. Could you add more? Yeah, maybe. But compared to what the manufacturers tell you, you're going to use 10% the amount. 15% the amount of nutrients. Why? Because all these bottles are based on 1,000-watt lights with 10 plants vegged for 4 weeks in 1-gallon bucket, then flowered for 8 weeks in 3-gallon buckets. Blah. That's what it's meant for. And it doesn't even tell you to feed during that week that you have to. It just says if you were. But these are great healthy plants, not the shit that you guys grow. So there's a big discrepancy in what they're telling you. You have come to believe that they're telling you something that they're not. And what do they care? Because 85% of you fail and you get replaced by new growers. It's not a long-term market. It's a short-term, very short-term, 3 to 6 months and you're out. Our market's being held together always has been held together by new growers coming on and failing and then throwing away the equipment. 18 to 49-year-old males. Okay. So when we talk about flushing, in soil or cocoa, don't care. What we're talking about is if you have high concentration of nutrients, whether it's organic or not, because organics break down. I mean, the organic thing is nonsense. So you have lots of nutrients, you can rinse some away, and the plant will finish with less availability of nutrients, and hopefully your bud won't be as harsh. Okay, that's the theory on flushing. Now, in soil or cocoa, the media can hold nutrients. There is actually media that gets stored in the nutrient. So I'm going to show you a picture of how I describe this in the Grow Book and Equipment Guide. I keep this one very special picture to describe what the heck I'm talking about. Oh, here we go. Ta-da! Boom. Okay. What I'm trying to express to you is that plants operate a month at a time. 5 minutes to you is 5 months to them. When we look at these 3 feeding schedules, the first one is feed, water, or water, water, feed. The second one is feed, feed, feed. And the last one is feed, water, feed, water. One of the things that I like to bring up to you guys is if you put a plant, the bigger the bucket, the more nutrients you're going to add. Let's say you have this bucket and you add a quart of water. It's a 1-gallon bucket. You add a quart of water at 500 ppm. Okay. If you're in a 5-gallon bucket and you add 5 quarts of water at 500 ppm, you have put in 5 times the nutrients. What manufacturer talks about bucket size? Who the fuck else reminds you that if you want to put the same nutrients in this bucket as this bucket, then you have to ask yourself about volume, not ppm. If it took 5 mils to make 1 quart 500 ppm and you need 5 quarts for this bucket, you would have to put 5 mils total, 1 mil per quart, where this one got 5 mils per quart. That's the same amount of nutrients. But none of you guys do it because you guys are all nutrient heroes. Oh my God, I'm gonna save the world, grow the best weed with an LED and more nutrients. What I'm suggesting is that I don't care if you do either one of these 3. The difference is this. I don't care if you do 500 water, water, water feed, or you do 333, 333, 333. I don't care if you do 500, this 500, as long as the time frame is the same. So if you're watering 5 times in a month, I don't care if you want to feed 1,000 ppm over the month. I don't care if your dumbass wants to make 200 ppm 5 times or 500 ppm twice. If you want to do more work or less work, I don't care. But unless you know the volume of water, and we're talking about, so now suddenly you're in a big bucket. a 5-gallon bucket. Your question is about flushing. If you've been putting in 5-gallon bucket worth of nutrient for a 1-gallon bucket plant, you have too many and you have to flush. But if you're in the right size bucket and the plant is doing the right thing at the right time, you can do a flush, sure, but you might do a flush with something like a mag sulfur, like a Flora-Nectar mag sulfur. You might, instead of doing a flush with a flushing agent, you might, this is Flora-Nectar. So instead of going and getting like a final flush from Advanced or a Clear X from Botanicare, you could run some of this through, some Flora-Nectar through. It's got mag sulfur, so when you were done, you would have mag sulfur in there and the plant would finish and you wouldn't have to do anything again. I mean, water for the last few weeks. Now that's media, because in media, the media holds, the media is made, soil is nutrients, it's just nutrients makes soil. Cocoa breaks down organically too. But they both hold water. In hydro, if you take out all the water, what nutrients remain? Okay, only the nutrients that are already locked into the roots. So now you just put water in the reservoir, or you just put a couple hundred ppm of mag sulfur. See, in soil or cocoa or any media, the media can retain the nutrients. Now, if you haven't overfed, you could do a very simple flush with something a little like mag sulfur. But if you overfed because you caught this channel late and you're a nutrient hero, you have to flush now. I'm just saying that there's no reason to flush if you didn't overfeed. Maybe just a little, pour some of that through at the bottom. But you're not checking ppms of the flush. You're not checking the pH of the flush. You're just running some out the bottom and continuing to let the plant go for 2 months. If you never overfed, then you don't have to worry about the amount of nutrients in the media burning the plant or causing your plant to be harsh. If you've never overfed and there's not too much. If you have overfed and there has been too much, it's already too late. I gave you the equation. Every time you have a problem, it's 20% less yield. So if you've overfed at any point throughout the process, 20% yield, less yield. I'm just saying, when you look at these pictures, look at how the nutrient builds up. It just builds up. And so if you build up nutrient like this, yeah, it's probably a good idea to flush. But if you built up nutrient like that, a flush ain't gonna fix it, my friend. That's my point. You can't do 10 weeks of your dumbass overfeeding the plant and think you're gonna fix it in 2. That's not how this works. Why do you think the organic freaks tell you, oh, in organics, not all the nutrients are broken down, so you don't get too many nutrients all at once? It takes time. I go, yeah, but you only feed once per bucket with organic nutrients. I mean, if it takes time to break down and you're in a bucket for a month, why would you feed twice in veg? You would only use organics once very early on, give it time to break down. You transplant it into a bigger bucket, you water, you feed once, and you give it 8 weeks to break down. I mean, if you fed a second time at the 4-week mark in flower, how would they break down? They would still be in there. You couldn't flush out. I'm just saying, you get that conflicting information on both sides because everybody else is wrong. The reality is that if you can finish a bucket of soil and you've never overfed, the bucket is still full of nutrients. Now, let's take that to hydro. Hydro, you take out all the water, the only nutrients are locked into the roots. I mean, even soil, the rest of the soil is nutrients. In hydro, what's left? Truly, if you want to do a flush in hydro, all you have to do is change the water and put nothing in it. You don't need to uncouple the nutrients from the roots. I mean, if you can flush soil, and there's no way to flush soil, there's just no way to flush soil because soil is nutrients, then that doesn't even make sense. And to flush hydro, I mean, if you think soil makes sense and you're in a 5-gallon bucket, you've got nutrients for months. What are you flushing? And the plant still has access to them while she's finishing. It's not like you flushed the soil away and just hung the roots there. And so just the premise of what you're asking is insane. There is no decision tree with a conclusion that says your assumption is viable. If you flush the soil is still made of nutrients. You can't get all the nutrients out of the cocoa. So the question is if you have a level of nutrients less than the plant wants or not more than the plant wants, do you have to flush so it is lower than what the plant wants, or is just what the plant wants enough? And if it's what the plant wants and you never overfed, then your media starts finishing. No need to flush because there was never a need to add too many nutrients. So there is no scenario where you did not overfeed that you have to flush. There's no scenario. You might do an ion exchange with mag sulfur, but there's no need to flush if you never had too many nutrients. The decision tree, never had too many nutrients, go straight to finishing. Okay. You add too many nutrients. Great, you got to flush. But what the fuck do you think is 2 weeks worth of no nutrients going to do for a plant that had too many nutrients in a bucket that still has nutrients? So there is no scenario where you've overfed and flushing solves the problem. It does not exist in soil and cocoa. It cannot exist because it's still in the media. Plus, if you did 10 weeks worth of fucking the plant over, you think you're going to fix it in 2 and make it better? I'm just saying that flush in hydro is the only real flush that exists. Mathematically, it's the only real flush that exists. It has to be, because you put in a new bucket of water and it is 0. So whatever is in the plant is now the last of it. Compared to just the nutrients locked onto the roots, a 5-gallon bucket of soil is 10,000 times the amount of nutrients. Because if you take out your roots in soil, you get rid of the rest of the soil, cut the bottom of your plant off so you're just holding the roots, and put it back in whatever bucket you're using. You're going to have this many roots, and you're going to be in like a 5-gallon bucket. Sorry, because everybody fails. The guys who are doing good, it's something different. But the ones who are failing, go rinse off all your soil, take your root ball, and see what the fuck is really up. You're like, oh, bigger bucket, bigger plants. And I'm like, dude, you got this much roots. And you're in a 5-gallon bucket. How can you possibly flush that relationship? There are so many contraindication facts that a flush has anything to do with anything when it comes to media. All I'm saying is the only place that you really can do a flush is hydro, and it's not a flush. You just change the fucking water and don't add anything. There's no mathematical situation where you would ever do a flush. Then have it matter. There is no situation where you would buy that product and expect better results. Now, I could see you buying that product because your dumbass overfed. I could see you buying that product because you got high, put the nutrients in, then did it again, and then watered with it. I can see both of those. They both seem reasonable. I'm just saying, there is no positive reward outcome on a decision tree when it comes to growing cannabis for doing a flush. There's all scenarios with a flush involve problems. Whether you got high and you doubled up the newts or didn't get the newts or had your meter on the wrong setting because you didn't get a Grow Boss Mega Meter, whatever the reason is, all I'm saying is a flush is trying to solve a problem. That's it. You're trying to solve a problem. So as soon as you try to solve a problem, you just multiply your everything by 0.8 and expect 20% less. That's the reality about flushing. There is no reason in a good garden to flush. Maybe a slight ion exchange, whatever's in the media for some mag sulfur. Maybe you put that in the next res and hydro. But the technicality of what we're talking about and the decision tree of why you're flushing, those decisions are clear. And that's what I mean by the logic of growing weed. There is so much data out there on both sides that nobody really understands that flushing is only a rescue operation. By definition, flushing is a rescue operation. Something went wrong. Otherwise, you just change the water in a hydro system, and that's not really that's not really flushing, is it?
Same with food too, like avocados and stuff. We don't flush them. We got an avocado ranch. We never flush before we harvest the avocados.
So how did you feed the avocados? Tell me about that.
In the system, in the watering system, down in the where the pumps were and stuff, we pour the granular nutrients into the pump system.
Okay, and then you pumped it out. How often did you feed?
Maybe once through the whole season.
Once through the whole season.
Yeah.
Now,
there was no flushing though.
Now, in terms of once through the whole season, I'll tell you, the roots go so deep that they're probably 7 seasons deep. So you put nutrients up here that will get 7 seasons down later. You know, some of it I'm sure is activated right away. There's some roots up there. But again, when growing plants, you have to be so forward thinking. Time slows down. 5 minutes to an American. It's 5 months to a plant. And I say an American, I'm very specific about that.
Like a New York minute.
Like a New York minute, exactly. So, Funny Tube, I hope that answers your question. Romper, stomper, bumper, boo, grow boss, tell me what to do. That's funny.
Magic mirror.
That's great. You got, oh, and you have to flush with that nutrient company's product. So if you've been using dick hole nutrients and they don't have a flush, you can't use GH. You could totally use it. You could totally use it. All calibration solution is the same. It's all the same shit. I initially wanted to double the newts per gallon. That's the only way to clean the plant. Perpetuating bad info, sarcasm. If you have comments, leave them for me. Leave them in all caps. Grow Boss has info on nutrients. Oh yeah. It's all the same shit. And I'm out. That's everything you need to know about. No, there are 2 things that you need to know about nutrients. 1, don't kill your plant with too many. More is worthless. And 2, it's all the same shit. It has to be all the same shit because all the manufacturers say the same shit. You get more, you get bigger, test higher. We're better, the bestest, the world's bestest. We have, 473 scientists on 762 continents on, like 12 planets in 3 solar systems.
And we got one guy that works just on trace nutrients alone.
Oh yeah, the one guy.
One guy
Just working on trace nutrients.
The uptake.
The uptake of trace nutrients. Never feed more than the watts of your light. Boom! You're welcome. Where have I heard that before? So how do you flush in cocoa? If you're going to flush, what you do is you figure out how much water you usually water with. Like, not your dumbass putting a little bit of water on top. Like, if the bucket gets dry and you add water, if you add a quart, you're most likely going to need 3 quarts of water for a flush. What'll happen is you'll pour all the water in, you'll catch the water that comes out, you'll pour all the water, you test it for ppm, you'll pour all the water in, you'll test it for ppm when it comes out, then you'll test it again when it comes out, and at some point the number will stop rising. I think maybe I have a graphic for a flush. No. I do not have. I do have a graphic in my book for the flush. I do not have the graphic with me, but it's too bad. Okay, so using this graphic, you can see the feed, the one in the middle. So you would pour enough through that like twice what you water would come out. And you would test it and you would pour it through and you'd pour it through and you'll notice that it peaks off after 3 or 4 times through. The flush, there's no more flush left to remove anything else. So what you would do is, if that number is still too high for your liking, you'd throw that water out again and you would make more water. You don't have to make as much the second time. If you made 3 quarts the first time, you would just make 2 quarts because the bucket's already saturated. And then you'd pour that through and you would check it. I mean, if the number was so high that you wanted to add 3 more quarts, whatever, don't care. But you get the idea of how to use it. And so I'm just saying 2 weeks of flush doesn't solve the problem of you overfeeding. That's really what I'm getting at here.
Maybe some people think flush is like you run it through and it washes off the soil, and like the nutrient that's attached to the soil that's left over, and you run this stuff through and it washes it off there, and it comes out the bottom. Is that how that stuff works?
Well, if you added nutrients, it would wash those nutrients out. If the soil is intact, it takes time to break down. So it doesn't wash the soil out.
No.
So even if you washed out the nutrients that you added, the soil is still made up of nutrients, except they're organic, so they're unavailable to the plant until they break down. So you can remove a tremendous amount of the nutrients that you added, but you can't break the soil down with a flush.
Once you're using a flush, though, you're in trouble.
If
you're using a
Yeah.
flush because you've added, you're in trouble.
Yeah. If you're using a flush, you're either in trouble or you don't get how to use nutrients. So John Jonah Jameson says, if I don't flush cocoa, how do I get yellow leaves? Feed less throughout the entire process. Now, if you're asking why don't your leaves yellow in autumn? So at the end of flower, your leaves autumn, they yellow evenly across the canopy. They die from the top down, from the inside out. They pale evenly. They don't just get yellow tips and stripes, burnt ends, not that shit. They pale evenly. Don't overfeed. I mean, if there's no nutrients left in your cocoa when you start finishing in the last 2 weeks, why wouldn't they yellow? Number is coming out at 100 ppm. Okay. So it doesn't sound, that seems like a pretty low number. I love to see you guys school people and get them winning. Yeah, I want you guys to think about things logically, because the nutrient manufacturers, they're going to tell you they're the best. The light manufacturers, they're going to tell you the nutrients are the best. The soil manufacturers and all of their advertising tell you that nutrients are the best, right? In all of the advertising that you see, everybody tells you nutrients are the best and that their product is a close second. So Solar Storm advertising, it always says, don't forget, nutrients are the #1 thing you need. But when you're ready for a light, ours is the best light. They don't ever say that. Everything's the best fucking thing there is, right? Everything's the best fucking thing there is. All I'm saying is it's all the same shit, right? It's 50% light, it's 50% grower talent, it's 50% equipment. It has to be. And you have to get them all right. There's no other way to do this. And so when you guys start using poor failed logic to justify your dumb, ridiculous actions, I don't see how this situation could turn out anything other than a train wreck. But then, hey, 99% of guys that start growing